Hello everyone, welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Today in this session we are going to have a discussion on the newspaper of 24th of April 2024. So let's begin with the list of articles first. So we have these four articles that we are going to discuss in detail today. So these articles are first about FMCG firms and what the Supreme Court has said about this. Then about junk food, and this is an article that we have on your editorial page, a very important article. Then something related to the Pradhanmantri Awas Yojna, and we'll discuss about some of the problems associated with it. And then after that, how India is trying to boost the electric vehicle production. So these are the four articles that we're going to discuss in depth. And then after that, we have these four articles from the prelims perspective. One, the relation between inflation and the climate change. Then something that we have seen, how economic output in manufacturing has seen certain changes. Then NABARD coming out with a report for green financing. And then lastly, something related to how the body tries to fight against virus. So these are the four articles from the prelims perspective. Now let's begin with our first article, and this is government should act on FMCG firms using misleading ads. Now this is an article that we have on your front page today. Now this is something which is very crucial from the perspective of our understanding of what's happening in FMCG. Now when we say FMCG, understand the meaning of FMCG first before we move on to the article. FMCG stands for fast moving consumer goods. Alright, FMCG. Now when it comes to FMCG sector, this is a sector where we see that this is where you have a lot of such items which are cheap or which can be bought and at very low cost. And as you can see, all these items, whether you have food articles or whether something related to toiletries or something related to cosmetics, cleaning supplies, etc., all these will be counted as a part of FMCG. So that's why when it comes to the FMCG sector, there are broadly three segments when it comes to the definition of what FMCG sector is. So first thing is, when it comes to FMCG, just understand how exactly do we define it. Now, when it comes to the FMCG sector, the very first thing, there are three different ways or three main sectors into which we are defining it. First, the food and beverages sector. All right, the first segment is food and beverages. Food and beverages. So this is where you have a lot of different aspects of packaged foods or snacks, dairy products, or the carbonated and non-carbonated beverages. So all these things, and even including the alcoholic beverages, will also be included here. So that is the first segment. And then after that, the second important segment from the perspective of this is personal care and toiletries. Now in this case, you have this segment where you have cosmetics, soaps, shampoos, skincare items, etc. All these will be considered as a part of personal care and toiletries. So this is the second important segment. Personal care and toiletries. All right. And then lastly, the third segment is household and cleaning items. So household and cleaning items. So all these will be also included as a part of the FMCG sector. So when it comes to, let's say, household and cleaning items, you have this segment which covers the cleaning supplies, the laundry detergents or insecticides, and all the essential household items. So this is basically what we define as the FMCG sector. Now what exactly do we see? What has happened? The Supreme Court of India, basically led by Hima Kohli and Justice Amatullah, what they have expressed is significant concern about misleading advertisement by the FMCG companies. Now in this context, when it comes to the FMCG companies, they have emphasized on the negative impact that it can have on public health, and especially on the vulnerable groups like small children and school children. Now the court's statements, they came in the context of the allegations about the high sugar content in the Nestle baby food products in India, and at the same time they have also have prompted the Union Consumer Affairs Ministry to direct the Food Safety and Standards Authority in India to investigate all these matters. Now, the court has criticized the active role of misleading advertisements in deceiving the families and compromising health, and that's why it has also highlighted the necessity for the government also to intervene and have a more active participation when it comes to these kind of advertisements, which especially are targeting children and infants. Additionally, the court also expanded the legal discussion by adding the Ministries of Consumer Affairs and Information and Broadcasting Ministry as well as the parties to the case. And that is something that signals a very broad, you can say, scrutiny of the FMCG advertising practices that we see right now. Now, during the proceedings, what we also saw was that Justice Kohli had also inquired about the efforts of the center to identify and regulate the FMCG companies that engage in misleading advertisement. And it was also referred to the Advertising Standards Council of India, which had flagged nearly more than 1,000 objectionable advertisements in the last 2 years, which also questioned the follow-up action that was taken by the authorities. And that's why we see that all these things were also noted in this particular judgment. Now, overall, when it comes to the advertising in the FMCG company, in the context of the court's observations, it also includes the contempt case that is running right now against the Patanjali Ayurved and its founders for the advertising the Ayurvedic drugs as curing COVID-19, and this was in violation of the legal commitments and the regulations altogether. So that's why this ongoing legal battle that we have right now, it also highlights a very broad issue of regulatory oversight and consumer protection against misleading practices by the FMCG companies. Now, overall, when it comes to the advertising part, and we have seen that the case against Patanjali Ayurved specifically has been running for the past couple of months, and that is where we see that the next date also we have seen that the court also has come out against Patanjali Ayurved, where they also said that the apology that has been printed in the newspapers, they also said that whether the size of the apology is also the same as the size of your advertisements, because the way the advertisements have happened, the same way apology should also happen, is what the Supreme Court said. Now, in this context, we have to understand that although the case against Patanjali Ayurved has been highlighted a lot, but it's not only one company that does this kind of a practice. You'll find that these practices are prevalent in a lot of FMCG companies. You just go and look at any XYZ advertisement related to any FMCG company or any FMCG product, you'll find that in one way or the other, it's not that they are telling you the exact truth or the complete truth, and many a times they are completely opposite of what they might be. That, for example, let's say many of the malt based drinks, this is also something that we discussed. Many of the malt based drinks, like for example your Bonvita or Complan or Horlicks, etc., they also are pretty misleading in their advertisements. For example, they although they are being said as health drinks, something like a Bonvita has more than 49% of sugar per 100 grams, which is huge. That out of 100 grams of Bonvita that somebody consumes, there are 49 grams of just sugar in it, and then 51 gram of everything else. And then the advertisements are saying that these are health drinks. Similarly, some of the other health drinks will also claim that if you are a regular consumer of this drink, this is something that is going to increase the height in children, and all these things are going to happen. So unfortunately, when it comes to the children and the infants, the parents are more likely to succumb to these kind of advertisements, because every parent would want the best for their child. And in this context, when something like this happens and these kind of misleading advertisements especially happen, especially in case of when it comes to children or the infants, this is where the problem lies. And at the same time, anything related to health, anything related to health, because whether health of the children or whether health of adults, it is something that people will always try to ensure that they have these kind of products, and they are able to prevent any kind of problems that might have happened in the absence of these kind of products. So that's why many a times we see that there are a lot of misleading things being said, and it's good that the cognizance is being taken by the Supreme Court now, and we need to see how exactly the things change in the coming months. Coming to the next article, toss out the junk food, bring back the healthy food plate. Now this is an article that we have on your editorial page today, and what we basically know is that India today is experiencing a very profound shift in the dietary patterns, and this is often referred to as the nutrition transition, which also reflects the broader trend that we have seen globally. So overall, when we look at this transition, when we look at this transition, we are looking at a nutrition transition, right? So we are looking at a nutrition transition. Now, what kind of transition are we speaking of? This is where we see that from the traditional diets, which are rich in fiber, we are moving towards Western style diets, which are very high in calories and a lot of processed food. Now this transition, it involves a move away from the traditional fiber rich whole food, which where we see that they have been very often seen to be more healthy. At the same time, this dietary shift has also emerged alongside India's rapid economic growth and urbanization, which has led to the increased consumption of the junk food, such as cookies or cakes or chips or instant noodles, etc., or sugary drinks, for example. All these things which have pretty low essential nutrients and have very high calories, fat, salt, sugar and preservatives. So that's why all these kind of products, all these processed food, they come in under the category of HFSS, that is high in fats, salt and sugar. High fat, salt, sugar, HFSS. Now, so all these food items will obviously come under these kind of categories. So what we have seen is that this kind of a change that we have seen in the diet, the impact of this change in the diet is very significant. Scientific research has linked the consumption of these HFSS foods to various different types of health issues, including weakening of the immune system, or high blood pressure, high sugar spikes, or weight gain, or even increased risk of cancer. So we see that all these things have been seen in this context. So they do lead to a lot of problems like this, and that's why we see that these kind of studies, and there are so many of these studies, they have highlighted all these problems, and that's why many of these diseases, all these diseases, they also have been called as the lifestyle diseases. They have been referred to as lifestyle diseases. And why are we calling them as lifestyle diseases? Because unhealthy lifestyle is leading to a lot of diseases, and our food consumption pattern is a part of this unhealthy lifestyle. So that's why whether you look at all the kinds of snacks probably that you prefer, all these snacks probably are not good for health. And when you look at the negative aspects of all these, whether we are talking about the various different types of let's say noodles or chips or snacks or whatever we are consuming, the soft drinks that we are consuming, all these are pretty bad for health, and that's why we know that they have been linked with a lot of different problems. So that's why when it comes to things like obesity or diabetes or hypertension or even cancer is what they have been linked with. Now, a 2023 study that was conducted by the Indian Council of Medical Research, it highlighted the alarming prevalence of the metabolic disorders that we have seen in India, with substantial proportion of this coming from populations which are affected by diabetes or hypertension or even obesity. Now, what we basically see is that compounding this issue is also the aggressive marketing, especially the targeting of the young consumers, which promotes these HFSS foods as tasty and affordable options. So what happens in this particular scenario is, and you can say that this is a continuation of our last article itself, where we were talking about the misleading ads. Now in this misleading ads, many a times the ads may not be misleading, but they are trying to let's say market their products in a manner which is pretty easy to consume, and that's why when the prices are being flashed on your TV screens, that this is going to cost just rupees 5 or rupees 10, or for rupees 10 you are going to get 20% extra or 30% extra. So all these are ways in which a consumer, especially the young consumer, is lured into this, and we have seen a shift in the patterns of our consumption in this particular scenario. And the data also shows a very worrying pattern among the children with very high consumption rates of packaged foods and sweetened beverages. Simultaneously, the food processing industry in India is also booming, and with the predictions also suggesting that it will be worth approximately $535 billion by 2025-26. So that's why we know that this is a segment that is growing. And altogether, again, when it comes to the FMCG sector, if any one of you is also someone who invests in the stocks, you will often come across many of the experts saying that you should keep on investing in the FMCG stocks, because FMCG in India is only going to rise with the rising consumption pattern, the changing consumption pattern that we have seen in India. These FMCG product consumption is only going to rise in India, and hence it is going to generate more revenue for these companies, and hence the share prices of these companies are only going to soar. So that's why for somebody who is investing in the share market, they are often also said that, okay, fine, you keep on investing in the FMCG sector or in the FMCG companies. But unfortunately, there is the dark side of it, where we see that all these are also leading to the changing patterns of consumption, especially in food and beverages, which is leading to a lot of issues among the people who are young. And that's why we have seen so many rising cases of diabetes, for example, in the people who are young, or high blood pressure or heart related diseases in the people who are young, which was never to be seen, which was never seen in the past. So people who are in their 30s and 40s, they are seeing a lot of problems which often was seen in by the people who are in their 60s and 70s. So that's why we see that there are a lot of issues that are rising in this particular context, and in response to all these challenges, the Indian government has also initiated several health promotion measures. So for example, we also see that the Supreme Court of India emphasized on the right to health as fundamental, leading to the governmental strategies like, for example, Eat Right India or Fit India movement or Poshan 2.0. So there are all these different programs that are being now run by the government of India, so that they can also ensure that they are able to promote healthier lifestyles, because we have seen that otherwise health related concerns are rising and the health related expenditure in India is also rising, and specific regulations have also been set. For example, the 2020 the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India regulations that limits the sale of HFSS food in schools. Now, at the same time, what we have also seen is that several strategies are very necessary to translate all these policies into very effective actions. For example, the very first thing that will be very crucial is to define what is HFSS food. That when I'm saying that, okay, anything that has high fat, salt or sugar, what is high? What is the meaning of high? So the very first thing that needs to be defined is this, that any product, for example, any product needs to be, so for example, when we talk about the FSSAI, we need to ensure that the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India is able to give a clear definition of what does it mean by HFSS and which are the foods which are in this particular category, and that's why, so that they are able to enforce regulations more effectively. At the same time, so that's why at the same time what we need to also understand is that front of the pack labeling is also very, very crucial. That for example, let's say this is something that can help the consumers to make informed choices by providing very clear, visible nutritional information, such as warnings about the high salt content or warning about high sugar content. So maybe something like this will help. that this will help in ensuring that, okay, anyone, for example, let's say you go and buy a packet of chips, and that packet of chips already has mentioned that this has very high calorie content, this has very high salt content, and let's say any beverage, for example, let's say any soft drink has a label which says that this has a very high sugar content, then these kind of things probably will also bring a second thought in the minds of the people that, okay, fine, these are the things that we should not consume in very high amounts. Similarly, subsidizing health foods is also very, very important. Policies could also be designed to make healthy options like fruits, vegetables and whole grains more affordable and accessible than the junk food. So that's why this is very, very crucial, that make healthier options more affordable. This is also one of the problems. For example, let's say you go to any random market today, or any random, let's say, online website where you have the option of organic foods. Wherever you have the option of organic foods, the problem that you'll find is that organic foods, etc., will be very, very highly cost. They will have a very high cost as compared to anything that is not organic. So in that sense, what happens is, for a lot of people, the healthier food options are not affordable. So that becomes a very problematic part, and that is where we see that junk food has the share of the market that it has, because it becomes affordable in that sense that if somebody is looking for, let's say, a healthier option, they know that they probably will have to shell out money which is at least 3 times or 4 times probably in many cases compared to the non-organic options. So that's why we see that there are all these issues that we have. Similarly, promoting behavioral changes are also very important, that educational campaigns could also target people who are young to foster healthier eating habits through multimedia messages, or maybe promotion of the local food, or engagement with the social media influencers in this particular scenario. So all these measures, along with a broader cultural shift towards healthier diets, are very crucial for addressing the dietary challenges which are being faced by India in today's times. So that's why we have to understand that there are all these efforts that we'll have to make to ensure that we are moving in the right direction. Coming to the next article, an overview of the Pradhanmantri Awas Yojna urban scheme. So U basically stands for urban. Now in this particular scenario, when it comes to the Pradhanmantri Awas Yojna, the Pradhanmantri Awas Yojna, what we have basically seen is that it was initiated or introduced by the government of India back in 2015, and it aimed at providing affordable housing to everyone by 2022 by having several key initiatives. So for example, the initiatives about rehabilitation of the slum dwellers with the aid of private developers, or promotion of affordable housing for weaker section through credit-linked subsidy schemes, or also collaboration with between the public and the private sectors for affordable housing, and some of the direct subsidies for the beneficiary-led construction. So we saw that there were all these things that were aimed at. So slum rehabilitation, affordable housing with private and public sector partnerships, then credit-linked subsidy scheme, and subsidies for beneficiary-led construction. So there are all these various aspects of the scheme that we saw. But as of 2023, the scheme has struggled to meet the objectives. Despite being extended to even December 2024 for the completion of the houses sanctioned until March 31st, 2022, there remains a very significant shortfall in the housing. The government acknowledges that there is a need for approximately 20 million houses in the rural areas and almost 3 million houses in the urban areas. But more critical assessment also suggests that urban shortfall alone could surpass up to 60 lakh housing, that is approximately 6 million. So this report, or the government has been putting out data that approximately 3 million is the shortfall, but some of the other data suggests that the shortfall could be as significant as 6 million. Now, when it comes to the Pradhanmantri Awas Yojna dashboard, it has indicated that approximately 40 lakh shortfall from what was sanctioned and completed is there right now. and this also highlights a particularly, you can say, problem in the redevelopment, or what we call as the in situ slum redevelopment. Now overall what we have seen is that this is something that was intended to address the most pressing urban needs, but what we basically have seen is that approximately out of all uh, the houses that were sanctioned under the in situ slum redevelopment, there are approximately only 2,10,000. There are approximately 2,10,552 houses right now that have been sanctioned. So you can say that what it is covering is just a fraction of the demand. Overall, the Pradhanmantri Awas Yojna has provided approximately 80 lakh homes, which has addressed approximately, you can say, 25% of the housing shortages. But even with all the sanctioned projects which were completed by the end of 2024, which were supposed to be completed by the end of 2024, the scheme will still not be able to meet the entire actual need. It will probably be able to reach only up to 37% of the entire demand. It will be able to reach only 37% of the requirement by 2024, right? So by 2024 it will be able to just complete maybe 37% of the actual requirement. And there are several issues that we have seen which has hindered the effectiveness of the Pradhanmantri Awas Yojna. For example, the reliance on the private sector, their involvement to supplement the public investment in the social housing has been overly optimistic. And in many cases, the redevelopment projects, they have led to new problems for the residents, such as unaffordable utility costs and inadequate living spaces. So there have been all these cases as well. And in many of the cases, what we have also seen is that the people, so first has been the over reliance on the private sector. Second has been high cost of utilities and inadequate living spaces in the new housing developments that have discouraged the occupancy as well. So what we have also seen in many of the cases is that, for example, let's say a certain house was sanctioned to somebody, all right? A house was sanctioned to somebody. Now let's say this is a 1 BHK house that has been sanctioned. Now they find this inadequate. They find that the living space that they have in this 1 BHK is not adequate enough for them, and at the same time what they have done, what many of the beneficiaries have done, that they have remained where they were, and they have put these kind of newer housing arrangements that were done for them for rent, and that's why they are trying to earn money out of it, yet residing in these slums. So many of the cases we have seen that these kind of problems, they have led to this not being very effective. Then at the same time, the legal and the bureaucratic obstacles related to the land availability, they have further complicated the entire effort, particularly where the land is being controlled by entities, for example, entities like airports or railways. It has also led to reducing of the progress. Then similarly, what we have seen is additionally there is often a mismatch between the city master plans typically designed by large consulting firms pushing for capital intensive projects, and then there is the needs which have to be addressed by the Pradhanmantri Awas Yojna. So that's why we see that the financially the scheme is primarily supported by the beneficiaries themselves, who are contributing approximately 60% of the funding, and the central government contributions, which are approximately 25%, while the state and the urban local bodies, they are providing the remainder of, you can say, the 15% of the money. So that's why the program structure largely favors those who already have owned the land, and that's why the evidence also suggests that overall, when it comes to all these different aspects of the scheme, they have led to a lot of problems related to especially the landless slum dwellers, where the support for them have been very limited. So that's why we have seen that there are all these issues that we have seen in this context, that overall, while the Pradhanmantri Awas Yojna has made some very important strides in addressing India's housing crisis, its reach and effectiveness, they have been very limited by a combination of a lot of different factors. Sorry. For example, ambiguous planning or insufficient integration with the local urban planning and the financial constraints that we have seen. So that's why all these things have left a very significant proportion of the population without any adequate housing altogether. So that's why we have to understand all these issues, regardless of the fact that this is a scheme that has taken the social housing scheme to a very positive direction, but at the same time, all these challenges, the obstacles, they have to be taken care of if we want a further development. And maybe the government can learn from the mistakes of the past 7 odd years, and appropriately it can take actions in the future. Now coming to the next article, how is India planning to boost EV production? Now what we basically see is that the government of India has approved a new policy on March 15 to make India a manufacturing hub for electric vehicles. And we had discussed this in our news analysis as well when we discussed this on March 16th. Now, the new policy that has been approved by the government of India on March 15th, it basically tries to have India as a significant hub for electric vehicle manufacturing. Now, when it comes to the various aspects and implications of the policy, the very first thing that we need to have what we have to see is that the policy tries to pave way for the international electric vehicle manufacturers such as Tesla to enter the Indian market. So that's why this is very crucial, that they want the entry of the global companies. So first thing that it is aiming for is global market entry. All right, global market entry. Then after that, what we saw was that a minimum investment of rupees 4150 crores is required for the eligibility under this policy. At the same time, another very important aspect has been the import duty, the reduction in the import duty. The import duty on the electric vehicles imported by, let's say, the completely built units, what we call as completely built units, has been reduced to 15% from approximately 70 to 100% that we used to have. And provided that these vehicles, they have a minimum cost, insurance and freight value of $35,000. Now, so that's why we are talking about a CIF value, that is cost, insurance and freight. So that's why you have to understand that the value for all these kind of vehicles which have a CIF value of at least $35,000, for them we have seen that drastically import duty has been reduced. Now this lower duty is also valid for 5 years, assuming that the company establishes a manufacturing facility in India within the next 3 years. Now, when it comes to the volume and the investment caps, the policy permits the import of up to 40,000 electric vehicles over the scheme's duration, capped at approximately 8,000 units per annum, and which is also subject to a minimum company investment of $800 million. All right, so that's why just understand this, that when we are talking about this, maximum of 40,000 EVs are allowed under the policy with no more than 8,000 units per annum, and minimum investment of $800 million has to be done. Then up to 6,484 crores in duty waivers have also been offered, which is proportional to the investments that have been made. So overall, that's why in this particular scenario we see that all these are the ways in which the manufacturing in India is supposed to be boosted. Now the manufacturers are also expected to meet a localization target localization target of 25% by the third year and 50% by the fifth year. So in 5 years there have to be 50% of local manufacturing. Then, and again, failure to meet these targets or the minimum investment requirements could also lead to revocation of the bank guarantees that are being given to these players. So overall what we have seen is that there are certain impact it might have on the domestic players. So that is why we have seen that some of the domestic manufacturers like Tata Motors, they have raised certain concerns. So domestic manufacturers, for example, when it comes to Tata Motors, they basically have concerns that the lowering of the duties for high-end electric vehicles could harm the local industry and the investment climate. And the policy has been seen as a beneficial primarily for the companies that cater to the high-end market, and a segment where the most Indian manufacturers currently do not compete extensively. So that's where this also can become a challenge, that there can be a potential negative impact on the local industry due to the lower duties for the high-end electric vehicles. And the policy also encourages the manufacturers to consider just understand the problem. So first problem will be the competitive concerns, right? That when it comes to the lowering duty, it might mean that it could favor the companies coming from outside, and it could harm the local industry and the investment climate. That it could harm the local industries and investments. So this is the first concern. Then at the same time, what we basically see is that this is largely beneficial primarily for the OEMs that are catering to the high-end market. So mainly beneficial for high-end markets where Indian manufacturers currently, they do not compete extensively. So that's why when it comes to the problems of these policies, these are two concerns that have been raised. Now adaptation to the Indian markets is something also which has to be taken into account, that the global manufacturers are being encouraged to consider local environmental conditions, the road infrastructure and the typical usage patterns in their product offerings. And the significant challenges such as inadequate charging infrastructure, the range anxiety and a lack of affordable product offering due to limited localization currently, they are also hindering the growth of the EV market in India. So that's why what we see is that by 2030, India is projected to need approximately 1.3 million charging stations to support the aggressive EV adoption that we right now see. And this is something that was brought forward by a CII report. So the report says that at least 1.3 million charging stations will be required for the aggressive nature in which we are growing in the EV market. So that's why there are all these things that we have to consider from the perspective of this, that when we look at the broader economic and environmental considerations, sustainability and domestic focus is also very, very crucial. The policy is also critiqued for the potentially increasing the dependency on the imports rather than fostering a self-reliance and sustainable manufacturing ecosystem. Some of the experts, they have also suggested focusing more on the domestic demands to shape the product designs and the business strategies, which would naturally lead to a very robust export capabilities. So in the essence, the policy basically aims to boost India's role in the global EV market while trying to balance the need for the foreign investors and the domestic manufacturers with a very strong emphasis on localization and sustainable practices. But yes, there are certain concerns that have been raised, and these concerns will have to be addressed if we have to move in a positive direction. Now let's come to the prelims based articles, the first article that we have is inflation vulnerable to rising heat. Now what we basically see is that the Reserve Bank of India, what we have basically seen is that they have expressed concerns about the potential impact of the extreme weather events on inflation in the new edition or the April edition of the RBI's bulletin. Now they have noted that the CPI or Consumer Price Index inflation rates, they have settled at a 4.9% in March and averaging at 5.1% in the prior month. Now the officials, they have highlighted that an extreme weather condition and ongoing geopolitical tension could contribute to a volatile crude oil prices, and subsequently there could be inflation risks. And that's why further what the officials have said, that this is something that could be a red alert because of also what we have seen, what we also discussed in our previous discussions about the state of the global climate 2023 report, which has indicated likely that there will be an increase in the global temperatures, possibly making 2024 the hottest year on record. And this warning, this trend is also linked with a glowing threat of freshwater shortage. Data from the Indian Meteorological Department shows that there is a significant rise in the extreme weather events, emphasizing the need of a swift and unified response to all these changes. And despite all these concerns, there are some optimism that also have been raised. The likelihood, for example, of La Nina conditions, which are typically bringing increased rainfall to India, and this might lead to a good rainfall and a good monsoon in the Indian context. So we have to see whether or not this happens or not, because otherwise the forecast is basically something that has been supported by Australia's Bureau of Meteorology and the UN National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration as well. But in terms of economic implications, the RBI has highlighted that the recent trends in inflation are encouraging for India's economic growth, but overall the decline in the headline inflation since January 2024 and a holistic low in the core inflation in March, they have been seen to be beneficial. But these trends, they suggest that India's disinflationary monetary policies are effective and they are supporting the overall economic growth altogether. So that's why on one hand we do see that there is a lot of optimism in the Indian financials or in the Indian economy, but at the same time looking at the other aspect of climate change and weather patterns and how they are changing and what they might mean for India's economy growing further, we have to take a measured step, and we always have to be one step ahead of what is happening and how it can lead to a problem in inflation altogether for India. Now coming to the next article, April flash PMI signals quickening in combined economic output. Now in this context, what we basically are saying is that when we are talking about a certain report, and the combined output from India's manufacturing and the service sectors in April reportedly experienced its most rapid growth in nearly 14 years. And this has been indicated in a report that is HSBC Flash Purchasing Managers Index, or that's why PMI. So this report that was published, so it says that India's manufacturing and service sector combinedly recorded their fastest growth in nearly 14 years in this month of April. And the services sector in particular, it reached a 3-month high. And this surge in activity, it is also attributed largely to the increase in the international sales, which significantly have boosted the new order inflow in both these sectors. Notably, fresh exports or the fresh export orders for the manufacturing and the services sector, it expanded at their quickest rate since September 2014. And the report has also highlighted that the composite output index, which combines both manufacturing and the services, it rose to approximately its fastest pace observed in almost 14 years, and that's why it has been driven substantially by the rise in the new orders in the largely in the service sector. So that's why a significant increase in the international sales has led to higher order inflows, and with export orders reaching their fastest growth since September 2014, and the manufacturing firms, they have increased their hiring, while services firms, they have slowed down in the new jobs creation. So that is basically what has been said in this context. Now, one thing, this particular point is also very important, that the employment trends were mixed. The manufacturing firms, they have increased their hiring rates, but the services firms, they have slowed down on job creation. And despite a general decrease in the input cost for both these sectors, the manufacturers have improved their profit margins by raising the output charges, whereas the services firms, they have faced a deteriorating margins due to rising labor cost. So that's why we have to understand the difference between these two aspects, one of manufacturing and one of services. That in case of manufacturing, we have seen that the manufacturers have raised their output charges, and that's why they have improved their margins. But when it comes to the service firms, we have seen that they have seen worsening margins because of the increased labor cost. So on one hand, the manufacturing is doing better, on the other hand, the services, they are shrinking in their margins. Moreover, the orders to inventory ratio for the manufacturers, they remained above 1, but in case of April, we see that this slightly got moderated. The business confidence approximately across the sectors was seen to be positive, and that's why the expectations have continued to improve in the is going to improve in the coming years or the next year as well. So that is why we have seen a very important trend, where we have seen the fastest combined growth in the manufacturing and the services sector in the last 14 years. Now coming to the next article, NABARD unveils strategy to mobilize green financing. Now, green financing is something that we have discussed in some of our previous discussions as well, and how the government of India has been trying to focus more towards green financing, and the aspects on the problems associated with it is also something that we discussed a couple of days back. Now in this context, on Earth Day, the National Bank for Agriculture and Rural Development, NABARD, they introduced the Climate Strategy 2030, a plan that is focused on the urgent need for increasing the green financing in India. Now this strategy, it has emerged in the context of India requiring approximately $170 billion annually to meet the cumulative financing goals of approximately 2.5 trillion by 2030 for its climate actions. However, as of 2019-20, India has only managed to attract approximately 49 billion annually in green financing. So only 49 billion by 2019-20. And in this also, what we have seen is that of this, so that's why you can say that this is critically lower as compared to what we need. That on one hand, we say that we need 170 billion, and we have been able to gather up to 49 billion. Now, so that's why this is significantly lower than what's needed. And of this, approximately only 5 billion was directed towards adaptation and resilience, with the rest used for mitigation. So that's why this is something that highlights the scarcity of the private sector involvement in these crucial areas due to their limited bankability and commercial potential. And that's why NABARD's Climate Strategy 2030 is built on 4 major pillars. Alright, 4 major pillars. So that's why we have to understand that only 5 billion was allocated for adaptation and resilience, and most of the other segments basically have been given to other areas of usage. So that's why we see that this is something that largely most of the money has been used for mitigation. most of the money has been used for mitigation rather than adaptation and resilience. So that's why we have to understand that there needs to be a shift. There needs to be a shift, and for that shift, there are four basic pillars in this strategy that have been advocated. First, accelerating the green lending across the various sectors. Accelerating green lending across the different sectors, then taking on a larger role in creating the market opportunities for the green investment. So that's why expanding the market making role for green investment. Then after that, implementing internal green transformations, that is committing to an internal transformation that is towards sustainable practices within the organization itself. And then lastly, mobilizing strategic resources effectively to meet all these ambitious goals. So that's why there are these four pillars that have been advocated in this strategy, so that we can move towards a better green financing in India. Now coming to the last article for the day, new type of host defense against Zika, dengue viruses revealed. Now what we basically see is that there is a very complex nature of the virus transmission and how certain viruses are present in the body fluids without necessarily being transmitted through those routes. So just try to understand some of the key things that we need to see according to the study that was published. Now, very first thing, when it comes to certain viruses, we see that there are challenges in the transmission of the virus. Although viruses like Zika, dengue and chikungunya, they are found broadly in the body fluids such as saliva or semen, they do not typically spread via these fluids. And this perplexing fact this has something that has intrigued the scientists who seek to understand the intricacies of the viral transmission routes. Now in this context, when it comes to the viral mechanics in the body, viruses are very selective in their infection sites, and they target very specific cells that express their compatible receptors. So for example, let's say when you talk about HIV insects cell within the CD4 protein. So it will look for CD4 protein. Wherever it finds CD4 protein, so HIV targets cells which have the CD4 protein, and in case of SARS-CoV-2 virus for COVID-19, we know that they are expressed via the ACE2 receptors. There was a question in your prelims examination also that was asked about the ACE2 receptors. Now, in this context, that's why we have to understand that, for example, when we say that the HIV is something that targets the immune system of our body. Why immune system? Because the CD4 protein is found as a part of the immune system. So that's why when it targets the CD4 protein, it automatically is targeting the immune system of the body. Similarly, there is one very, very important receptor which is called as the PS receptor. Now in this particular scenario, the PS receptor or phosphatidylserine receptor. So what happens in this particular scenario is that we have the phosphatidylserine receptor. So the PS receptor. Now this is something that is used by some virus to enter the cells. Now this typically is something that binds the PS protein on the dying cell, and that is something that aids in the destruction of these cells. So what happens is that in our body, the PS receptor is something that normally helps the immune system to identify and destroy the dying cells. Now this PS receptor specially is used by some virus to enter and infect a cell, and this kind of a strategy is also called as apoptotic mimicry. Now in this particular scenario, what we basically see is that when this kind of a virus, they mimic this strategy and they are able to enter the body. Now, in this context, what happens is that when we are talking about all these basic receptors, we see that there is a controversy that happened back in 2020. The WHO had inaccurately tweeted that COVID-19 is something which is not airborne. So WHO said that COVID-19 is not airborne, and this is where a lot of confusion, it led to a lot of confusion and a lot of criticism from the scientific community, because a lot of scientists said that this is not completely correct. And this instance, this underscores the challenges in communicating and understanding of the mechanism of the viral transmission. And that's why we are talking about all these receptors. Now, the research on viral transmission, the recent studies that have happened in these cases, they have shed light on how human bodies might inhibit the spread of viruses like Zika. The study basically found that there was an extracellular vesicle that contains the PS protein, and they are abundant in saliva and semen. And these vesicles, they can block the entry of the viruses that use the PS receptors for infection by competing for the same receptors. Now understand this. So what basically we are saying is that the human extracellular vesicles, which contain the PS protein in saliva and semen, they compete with the virus for the same receptors and effectively preventing the infection. So basically this PS receptor that we have, the virus also wants this. The virus also is looking for this. The body, the human body is also looking for the same. And that's why there is a competition here, and the virus many a times could be defeated in this scenario. So that's why the implications of the study is something that we need to understand. That the presence of these PS coated vesicles, they serve as a defense mechanism and potentially something that can hinder the transmission of the viruses that rely on these PS receptors. And that's why this discovery not only advances our understanding of the host defense mechanisms, but also opens up new avenues for the potential therapeutic developments altogether. So that's why this study, it also speculates the presence of these vesicles. They might have been influenced by the evolution of the mosquito-borne viruses, forcing them to adapt to alternative transmission routes. And that's why this research also highlights the complexity of the viral transmission and how bodies' sophisticated methods try to combat any kind of infection, which might have been very far-reaching implications for understanding the controlling of the viral diseases. So that's why this is something that we have to understand with regard to this, that how body has developed a mechanism in which it can fight against the viral diseases by competing for the same receptors that the virus also want to enter the body. All right, and that's why we are saying that this might be a part of human body's evolution to try and save the body against the infections being caused by the viral transmission that happens through mosquitoes. So lastly, let's look at the mains questions for the day. The first question: evaluate the effectiveness of current government policies aimed at curbing the consumption of unhealthy foods and suggest comprehensive strategies that can be employed to reverse this trend. So first is, what are the policies? So we discussed about some of the policies, some of the programs were mentioned while we discussed it, and then what should be done further? What else can we do? What else can the government do? What else can we do? And why, how exactly informed healthcare practices are required in the populations? So that is the first question. The second question is, critically analyze the recent policy approved by the Indian government to promote India as a manufacturing hub for electric vehicles. Critically analyze. So critically analyze means that you have to look into both the positives and the negatives. You have to list down, okay, fine, these are the things that India has done so that we can boost manufacturing of electric vehicles in India. But at the same time, there are concerns. What kind of concerns? What kind of concerns have been raised by some of the experts and some of the domestic manufacturers as well? So these are the things that you will have to write in this answer. So with this, we come to the end of today's session. I hope that this session was useful for you. Please subscribe to the channel and please go back and revise all the important topics. Thank you very much for being here.